Let's go ahead and make a mini coffin.
When I do my mini coffins, I usually begin with a theme, an object, an idea. Sometimes it's like a movie or a movie character. A lot of times it will be something that's like horror themed or gothic themed. So for this coffin, it started out because my daughters and I were at Hot Topic and we were looking through the jewelry section, and my daughter found this set of necklaces, and it was 2 little vampire kitties on necklaces, and she showed it to me and she was like, "Mom, look how cute this is. Wouldn't that be a great idea for a mini coffin?" And I was like, "Yeah, it would be," but I wasn't planning on buying anything that day. And she's like, "Well, let me buy it for you so that you can do a new coffin." And so she bought me the kitty necklaces. So you saw me removing the kitties from the necklace part. I actually kept the chains because I'll probably use those somehow somewhere else. Then what I wanted to do with the coffin was I wanted it to be red. So here I am painting it with just red acrylic paint, but I didn't want it to be a bright red. I want it to be more like I guess I would go with like a burgundy kind of, or like scarlet, that kind of red, like a more darker toned red. So in order to do that, I did the actual red paint. I just painted the whole coffin inside and outside with the red acrylic paint. In order to achieve the darker red color that I was looking for, I decided to try something. I used my black tinted watercolor set. So I have a watercolor set, and each one of the paints in it is a black tinted, basically, color. So like there's a bluish black, a reddish black, a greenish black, etc. So I used the reddish black, and I just went over all of the areas of the coffin with that reddish black watercolor and let it dry. Another thing I wanted to do was to give each side of the coffin a background. I have this sticky like velvet that comes in sheets, and you peel off the back and you can stick it down to whatever you're working on. So I did the black velvet for one side, and then here's what I did for the other side. It's a kind of a torn and burned edge piece of paper that went in that other side of that coffin. The other thing I wanted to do for this coffin was to make some items. I had some things, but I wanted to like modify them. So I have these bottles, and I wanted to put my own labels that I cut out on it. And so I'm gonna cut out one of these like little skeleton labels to go on that bottle. It has it has something to do with like death elixir or vampire or something like that. So all I do for that is I cut out the little label, and then I attach it to that bottle using Mod Podge on the bottle itself, and then brush over it once the label is attached so that it sucks it down to the bottle, and then the bottle has a new label. I ordered these little bottles. I think most of them came from like Amazon. You can order packs of the bottles, and then I printed out the labels from, I just looked up online like sheets of, I think it was like Halloween or Gothic bottle labels, miniature, and it comes up with some that you can choose from, and I just printed them out, and I have a sheet of them in my drawers that I just pull from when I feel like creating a bottle to kind of match the aesthetic of the coffin that I'm working on. So here I have the shelves that I made for this coffin. I like to put shelves in my coffins because when you open them, then you can display what's inside in a much better way than if you don't have anything to rest all the items on. I just prefer that for my own little coffins that I do. So I get those thin wood panels that you can get at craft stores, and I painted them black, and then I cut them so that they would fit inside the coffin, and I'm going to glue them basically to the sides of the coffin. I use hot glue for this, and it makes it so that I have those little shelves that I can set all these little items that I'm either creating or placing in the coffin. Here is the next item I decided to customize. I have this little 2 candles miniature set, and I painted the candle red and I painted the flame orange, and now I'm just kind of putting that same watercolor that I had on the coffin itself over the colors to make it a little more dark and give it that like kind of worn look. And so if you have things that you're wanting to use in, you know, your artwork and it's not quite the way you want it, you can customize it however you want to do it. Acrylic paint works really well because it sticks to a lot of surfaces, or you can use, if it's a bigger thing, you could use spray paint. I did that on my dollhouse video back in, when was that, like November, December, when I did that gothic dollhouse, maybe October. Spray painting like wooden items works really well. So you can customize the color, you can customize, you know, if you want to age it or make it look a certain way, and that way your items can turn out the way you want them to, instead of having to like look for exactly the item that you're wanting, because a lot of times you'll find something that's close but not quite, and you can always get that or have that and just be creative with it. So now I'm putting my shelves in the coffin. Like I said, I like to use hot glue for this. It allows me to get that tip right down in there and give it a nice bit of glue, and it kind of can be hidden really well. Like if I paint over it, it kind of disappears, or sometimes if I put items, you know, on the shelves, you won't even notice the glue. So then here it is. I've got a little throne for one kitty, and I put the other kitty on the top shelf. I did have little pieces of black lace that I attached with Mod Podge in the background and over that shelf. I put some little kitty paws things that I had ordered. They're like little tiny plastic kitty paws. Some of them are inside the coffin, and then my thought was that I would stick them to the outside of the coffin, and I painted them black. They came in like pastel or pretty colors, and so I painted mine black, and then I'm going to attach them to the outside of the coffin, and I'm using Gorilla Glue Super Glue for this. Pretty much the only thing I ever use for my miniatures is Gorilla Glue Super Glue. I order it by like a 6-pack on Amazon, and then I also use the hot glue gun, and that's actually also Gorilla Glue, and I buy the sticks for that, and depending on what part I'm working on, I'll use either the super glue or I'll use the hot glue. I tend to use the super glue on the outside because it's easier to hide the super glue, and if I use the hot glue on the outside, because it does bead up and has the stringy parts, it's not as easy to disguise it. So it's easier for the super glue to be out in the open, basically. And so there's the kitty prints around the outside. I just kind of glued them randomly as if, you know, a cat was walking around. And then what I wanted to do with them next was take some red paint and give it the appearance of like blood spatter, like a kitty cat walked through blood and left, you know, like some bloody paw prints and some little bit of spatter, just because, you know, they're vampire kitties, so that only made sense. So I've started to glue some things down on the inside of the coffin. One thing I have is this little lantern. It's supposed to be for the outside of a building, but I had bought a set of them and they're actually lighted, like you can actually plug them in and light them, but I had this one, the lighting part broke on this one, and so I just cut the wires off, and I figured I would use it as just a decorative, you know, little lantern, and I thought it really fit good with the vibe here, so I'm gluing it to the wall behind her little throne chair, and I glued it down with hot glue, and I'm just kind of holding it in place with these pliers so that way the glue will set. And then I did those little skulls with the spider, I glued them down. I did her little lantern and her throne chair. I put some bats and a little artwork on the wall. There's the vampire kitty on the top shelf. So that's where we're at right now. with filling up the inside of the coffin. Now I'm moving on to fill in the spaces. A lot of times what I will do is I will get a bunch of items and I will try out different setups to see what I like, and then I'll take everything out and I'll start gluing stuff down. So that's what I did. I had a bunch of stuff and I just picked out the things I thought would fit the best in this little coffin. This is like a little, kind of like a little cake or tart type thing that I'm putting beside the kitty that's on the top shelf. If my camera will focus, there we go. And I try to remove as much of the extra glue as I can, but that will probably be hidden, and I'll show you how I do that towards the end. Now I'm moving on to the other side. So I've got this cute little bat that I'm gluing down. And definitely a vampire bat is appropriate for this coffin. And all I do is I put a bead of glue and then I stick down the item. This is that bottle that I glued the label to. Here's the candles that I customized with the red and orange paint and the black distressing, basically. I'm moving back over to, I thought her throne looked a little bit plain, so I've got this cute little metal teapot. So I'm gluing that to one arm. And so I glued it down, and just so that it's pretty sturdy, I added another bead of glue and pushed it down to set. That way there's no chance of it kind of becoming unattached. And then on the other arm of the throne, I had to pull her dress down here a little bit, but I'm gluing a little metal goblet, which looks very, royal and fancy, so I thought that was kind of cute to have the teapot on one side and the goblet on the other side. So she's got everything she needs for the moment on her little vampire kitty throne. And if you're wondering about the glues, my hot glue and my Gorilla Glue, here I'm gluing down this, she's the same on both sides. It's just a girl with long hair. When you flip over, she also has just the hair on, kind of like the Ring, I guess, but she's pretty creepy and I love her. I have a couple of her and I've put her in some of my stuff. Does this glue hold? I travel around with these, items, and they do get jostled around quite a bit. Here's a plant that I made. I used a bead and I put a little greenery inside it and glued the greenery to the hole in the bead. And so that's how I made that plant. And then there's another bottle that I customized and a little metal piece that I thought would look interesting down there. So these coffins travel in a travel trailer to the shows that I bring them to. They, some of them traveled all the way to Maine with me when I did my art show in Maine. They do get bumped around and jostled quite a bit. When I'm at the art shows, people are constantly opening them to look inside. So they do get quite heavy use, and I very rarely have to reattach anything or fix anything. Most of the time, everything stays in the coffin quite well, so I'm pretty happy with the glues. And here's pretty much everything that I came up with to glue in. I'm going to do some final touches, but I've added this little coffin charm at the top. I've got the girl at the bottom. I've got another bottle that I put in there. And now I'm doing the greenery, and what the greenery does is, number one, it looks really nice, and number two, it hides the hot glue. So if there's any spots where there's some hot glue strings that are pretty visible and I don't like the look of, I'll often put greenery there to cover that. And I just use, again, a little bit of hot glue, stick the greenery on, and it pretty much masks that whole area. So it's kind of a good solution to make that ugly visible glue disappear. So over time I've learned these little tricks to make, the things look better. I've been doing these mini coffins for, I'd say, about a couple years. I think it was around like 2023 when I did my first one. Okay, now the inside of the coffin is pretty much completed, but I'm not done there because I like to paint usually on the outside of the coffin, or I'll put, something there, but generally I like to paint something either on the front of the coffin like you see me doing here. Sometimes I'll do the front and the back, or sometimes on some of the smaller coffins I have, I might open up the first panel, because on the smaller coffins the shallow side is underneath the cover of the coffin. On some of those I've painted like a little something there, like a portrait of something, a scene. If it was based on like a horror movie, I'm thinking of like my Nightmare Before Christmas one, stuff like that. So for this one, since the theme is vampire kitties, I came up with this cute little vampire kitty that I'm painting on the outside. So in order to do the painting, I'd already done the outside of the coffin, the red color, and then I went over it with that darker watercolor. And so that part was finished. I wanted to put down some gesso to paint on. That way my painting would stand out from the background and it would make it easier for me to paint. So I put down some gesso and then I drew the kitty on the gesso with some pencil, and then I started painting. I also wanted to have some lettering on there. I'll often write something either on the front or the back, like a phrase, some words, a title, something like that. Sometimes I'll do like a quote or part of a poem or something like that. This one I wanted it to say Vampire Kitty, so I printed out Vampire Kitty in this font, and I thought this font went really well with the whole style. I got this off of Canva. This is a Canva font. I just went into Canva, typed Vampire Kitty, saved it to my computer, and then printed it out small so that it would fit on the coffin. And then what I do is I rub on the backside with some charcoal, and then I basically trace over the letters with my pencil, and it transfers it to the coffin, so that way I have a guide for doing my letters. I have terrible penmanship, handwriting. It's ugly, and I do not want ugly handwriting on my coffin, so I try to do a cute font, and then I'll just trace it on there, and I'll do it that way. That way I can always assure that the lettering that I do is very nice looking. I got out an acrylic paint marker. This one is an Ohuhu acrylic paint marker. It has a broad end and a fine tip end, and so I'm going to use the fine tip end to trace over the letters that I did with the pencil, and so that's how I get my lettering on there. I don't always use this acrylic paint marker. Sometimes I'll use just straight artist pens, that kind of thing. Sometimes I'll actually use a very fine paintbrush with some paint, and I'll just paint over the letters. It really just depends. I wanted to see if these Ohuhu markers would work, because I'm fairly new to them. I just got them like about a month ago, so I wanted to see if this would be an easy option for doing it, and it worked out pretty well for this style of font because it's a little bit thicker. If I had to do anything thinner, these probably would not work, because even the fine tip is a little bit more broad than like an artist's pen, but I thought it looked really nice for this particular lettering. Here I'm just going to paint the kitty cat. I'm using acrylic paints for this. I could use oil, but that would be kind of silly because I want this to be a quick drawing project and not have to leave it to dry for a while. So acrylic paint works really well on doing the coffins because I can do a quick painting and it's dry, by the end of the time that I'm painting. It just makes it easier logistics wise for completing the coffin. One thing I wanted to do was to jazz up the lettering just a little bit. The black looked nice, but it didn't really stand out. So I figured what I'd do is highlight each letter with a little bit of gold paint, because I plan to do some gold and some sparkles up in the background of the kitty I had just painted. So I think that'll look really nice with the gold in the letters and then the gold behind the cat. It'll make it stand out a lot more. And so I'm just lining just a part of each letter, not the whole letter, just giving it those little like gold highlights. And I'm using a very, very tiny brush, and I'm using some, I think it's like folk art, old gold, or like antique gold. It's that little jar that's behind my hand, but I love this gold. It's such a pretty gold, and it's a really nice, easy to use like finish for most things. Like it's not too thick, it's not really thin and watery, so I find it really useful for a lot of things that I do. There's the gold highlights on the letters, and that's all I'm gonna do. I'm not gonna do any more with that part. But what I am gonna do is behind the kitty, I'm gonna take that same gold and I'm gonna give a gold background where I did all of that gesso. So all of that area is going to be this little like gold, so it'll be kind of like a cameo of a kitty cat. So I'm just filling in all of that with the gold paint. And then I also decided to customize the back a little bit. I didn't go too ham on this one. Sometimes I'll do a lot on the back too, but this one I'm just doing the slash of like cat claws. I thought that would be a cute touch. So that is my vampire kitty coffin from start to finish. That is pretty much the method I use to do all of the coffins. I have done a bunch at this point. Like I said, they're very popular at art fairs and art shows. People love the novelty of them. People love seeing a theme that they really relate to. It's a lot of fun for me to create. That is my mini coffins, and I hope you enjoyed this video of seeing the vampire kitty mini coffin from start to finish. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being here. Hope you have a great day, and I will see you in my next video. Okay, bye!